Hi everyone, welcome to my latest blog post. So usually when I blog about something, it's either something that somebody has asked me about like several times by different people or something that just piques my interest. Today's actually something that has come up a few times in the last, I'd say, month or so. Now, if you've seen Nintex Workflow before and you can set your own task delegation when you're planning on uh, going on leave, what you do is at the very top right, this is a 2013 environment, you can do a drop down on your name, go to Nintex Workflow 2013 and go to task delegation. Then you can specify which dates you want to automatically delegate your tasks. So for example, I want to delegate on behalf of myself. I might do 1st of the 1st 2014 to 2014 and who I want to delegate it to, so it might be Brett. Now what this means is that any tasks that Nintex Workflow will assign to me during that period will automatically get delegated to Brett. Right? Now sometimes you'll forget to do that. A site admin can actually go in and do that on your behalf. Now where the question came up the last few times I've talked to some people is that, what if you want to use the Exchange out of office settings? Because that's usually what people do. People usually go to their Outlook environment, they'll go to the automatic replies and they'll set their out of office. And you can see in this example, I've actually set it to the 1st of the 1st to the December 30th of this year. So how do I use that? Well, actually Exchange has its own web service that you can use. And if you've used any of the Exchange actions in Nintex Workflow, you'll actually see there's a web service in there that you have to specify. One of the web services, which is the EWS ASMX, sorry, is it exposes a web method called the get user out of office settings. And all it takes, if you scroll down here, is just an email address for the user that you want to check. So what I thought I'd do is actually put together a user-defined action that will be able to check this for me. It'll actually query the Exchange web service, given the email address, and come back with number one, whether they actually have an out of office setting established. And if they do, it'll bring back the start and the end date so that I can use that in my workflow to put together a more robust workflow. Now here's my really simple workflow that I'm actually testing this out on. You can see this little box with a little workflow in it. This is my user-defined action, right? Little workflow in a box. If I open this up, I've actually hard-coded an email address in here just to test this out. And the output parameters, I want to get the end date and the start date, whether the out of office is actually enabled for this particular user, and then just an overall success that the web service call was a success or not. Then we're doing a conditional check just to make sure that if it was a successful call and out of office is enabled, then I actually want to log something, and in this case I'm actually logging the start and end time for when they're going to be in the out of office. Now I'm going to jump to my user-defined action. This is where all the work is being done. Right. This is just setting up some variable values, and then we're jumping in here. You can see this web request action. So I've created myself two constants. One is going to hold my Exchange EWS URL. Right, this is basically the Exchange web service URL. Because I'm going to be using this throughout other workflows, I don't want to hard code it in case my mail admin decides to move it to a different server. I don't want to have to go and change all my workflows. So this is going to store that in a workflow constant. I also have an EWS admin credential constant. So this is what I'm going to be using to query the query Exchange. So the credentials you use for this account need to make sure that they have the ability to do this. The method we're calling is the get user OOF settings, which is the out of office settings. And you can see it's a very simple SOAP packet. All I've done is replaced the address that that you would normally maybe type in. I've actually put in a variable, which is my input email address. So that's my parameter into this user-defined action. If I jump to my parameters, you actually see there's all the parameters that you saw that I was calling from the web service itself. 4 of them are output parameters, and one of them is the input, which is the email address. Once we've done the web request, we're actually checking whether the HTTP status response was 200. That basically means that it was a valid HTTP request, and we got some data back. Now we're actually going to pull out some data from our bunch of XML that we've received. So we're going to use the query XML action. This variable contains all the XML that came back from our web service call, and we're pulling out something called OOF state. That actually tells us whether it is this user has enabled or disabled their out of office settings. Right? The actual values, valid values of these are basically going to be disabled or scheduled. So there's a scheduled out of office setting, or there's no out of office setting. We do a quick check to make sure that it's set to scheduled right there. If it's not, we're setting one of our parameters that out of office is disabled. Therefore, if we use this in another workflow, we can actually check this and see, okay, out of office is not enabled, therefore we can continue on with the rest of our workflow. If on the other hand, out of office is scheduled, now we're going to pull out some other data. Now this query XML action allows you to pull out multiple bits of data. So in this case, we're actually pulling out the start time and also the end time and storing it in some text variables. Text start time and also text end time. Pretty straightforward. And the final action, or two actions in this workflow, are actually converting those text variables into date variables or date parameters. So date start out of office date is actually a parameter right there. It's a date and time parameter and it's an output. So this is where we're storing the results. So pretty straightforward. If I jump to my VM where I'm actually logged in as my colleague Brett, I go to my out of office. I showed you this has got the 1st and the 30th of December. And I know that I hard coded the email address here, but you would normally just pull that out of maybe a people field, a person and group field, or maybe you've queried LDAP or Active Directory and pulled the email address and use that in there rather than hard coding a value in. Now, if I go back and actually run my workflow, let's just refresh, make sure we've got the latest. Click on Start. It's going to run this workflow. It's going to go run through all the actions in that user-defined action. And it should pull back all that so you can see it's completed successfully. And it's pulled back the 1st of the 1st and the 30th of December, both 11 a.m. If I jump to my out of office, you can see it's exactly that. So now we have the dates and we can do something with them. Maybe once you got the out of office, you know that there is an out of office enabled. You can assign a task. Maybe this time you actually, instead of assigning a task to this particular user, what you're going to be doing here is actually assigning it to somebody else. So maybe we'll just do the manager of the initiator, or maybe just the initiator. It's really up to you. Otherwise, we'll just copy this and say, well, because the out of office in Exchange is not enabled, then we are going to assign it to Brett. Right? So in this case, you can really build out a robust workflow rather than having to rely on necessarily the task delegation. If you find that in your company, you guys are using the Exchange or the Outlook out of office settings, more so than a task delegation built into Nintex Workflow, you can start catering for that with a simple workflow like this and a simple user-defined action. Again, you saw how in this action, I'm using constants. I'm not hard coding anything. I'm taking input and output parameters. That makes this a very reusable user-defined action that you can use in other workflows. You can publish this user-defined action to be a site scoped, site collection scoped, which means it's available in every site, or you can promote it even more to become a farm-wide user-defined action, and then anybody in your farm who's building workflows can use this particular action. That's all I wanted to show you guys today. Feel free to get in touch with me if you find a better way of doing this. I'm happy to to implement something like that or make any changes if you find a bug in this. Feel free to get in touch with me. But for everything that I've tried this out, it seems to work and seems to work fine. So hope you enjoyed this and learned something. I sure did putting this all together, and I will see you in the next blog post.